When Paris Saint-Germain in the summer of 2021 completed the transfer of then six-time Ballon d'Or winner and a man widely considered by many as the greatest footballer of all time in Lionel Messi, expectations surrounding the transfer was through the roof.
Well, these are the shots that many thought they would never see. Lionel Messi wearing a football club shirt that didn't belong to Barcelona.
People started talking about how he could easily strike up a deadly partnership with two of PSG's biggest stars, his former Barcelona teammate Neymar and France's biggest superstar Kylian Mbappe, resulting to an even extended league domination and most importantly helping them finally win the big one, the Champions League.
And nobody will want to get drawn against Paris in the round of 16 now.
However, almost 2 years into this move, none of this ever happened, with PSG crashing out of the round of 16 in both of these two seasons, and the trio the whole world was salivating over their potential to cause mayhem unfortunately unleashed said mayhem onto their club instead, becoming the latest example of why not to have too many superstars in one team. Messi's time at the club has been such a nightmare, so much so that his name has constantly been dragged into the mud by the PSG faithful in an attempt to get back at their board for several years of poor decision making, as well as the increased negative press the club has been getting as a result of their actions.
I've stood on here a couple of weeks ago and said Paris Saint-Germain will not win the Champions League.
Messi himself has also come under fire for his actions recently after going on an unauthorized trip to Saudi Arabia, reportedly without the knowledge of the club, leading to one of very rare occasions in which the club actually puts their foot down and punishes a player before reports came out that Messi, who has long been unhappy at the club, was planning to leave in the summer. It seems crazy to think that nearly 2 years ago the entire streets of Paris was chanting this man's name as they genuinely believed that due to his status as a player, he was the final piece of the puzzle that PSG needed to finally dominate Europe. The team only seemed to have gotten worse since his arrival, and although Messi was never the problem, he certainly wasn't the solution. PSG had their own problems prior to Messi's arrival. Messi was indeed caught up in a mess he never really created, leading to his unceremonious demise at the club.
Antes que nada pedir perdón obviamente a mis compañeros, al club.
But we need to know how, and there is no better place to start from than the circumstances in which he arrived at Paris in the first place. Barcelona, home of one of two of the greatest clubs in world football, and more relevant to the story, the previous home of Lionel Messi. Messi was the king of Barcelona, where he played alongside some of the game's finest, won trophies and immortalized himself as a legend of the club. He did this all over the span of 21 years, and naturally this place was his home. It was literally impossible to envision Messi wearing any club kit that wasn't Barcelona's. Well, that was until August 2021. After it was revealed that despite all their efforts to keep him, Barcelona will unfortunately be letting the greatest player in the club's history leave, and worst of all, he was leaving on a free, Messi would subsequently deliver a tearful speech on Sunday, 8th of August 2021.
Hoy me toca despedirme de esto, de 21 años. Me voy con mi mujer, con 3 catalanes argentinos. No puedo estar más orgulloso de todo lo que hice y viví en esta ciudad, la cual no tengo duda que después de estar unos años afuera vamos a volver porque es nuestra casa.
Speculations surrounding where next he would go began taking world football by storm. But for a player like Messi, especially during a pandemic which crippled several clubs financially, including the one he was leaving, which ultimately led to his departure, his options were limited. His two main options for obvious reasons were Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain. Manchester City because of his former manager Pep Guardiola, and PSG because of his former teammate Neymar, as well as other Argentinian players such as Angel Di Maria and Leandro Paredes. With time, it was becoming pretty clear that Messi had made his choice, as reports quickly surfaced that PSG and Messi had already begun contract negotiations. In the early hours of Tuesday, 10th of August 2021, Argentinian newspaper Olé reported that the agreement between PSG and Messi's camp was almost done and was due to fly to Paris later that day. By 9:06 a.m., reputable journalist Fabrizio Romano would post the following to his Twitter account: "Patience. PSG totally confident and optimistic to sign Lionel Messi soon. He'll fly to Paris once the agreement will be completed in every detail. It's an important contract officially received 48 hours ago. Nearly 3 hours later, Fabrizio would post once again, this time confirming through Messi's father that the Argentine would be signing for Paris Saint-Germain later that day. The media coverage for this move was absolutely massive. Every major news outlet was reporting about every single development of the story. By 1:00 p.m, Antonella, the wife of Lionel Messi, would post to her Instagram account a picture of herself with the Argentine captain on the plane. All 5 of us are heading for a new adventure together. Meanwhile, in Paris, instead of the Parc des Princes, preparations for his arrival was underway. And at the airport, where he was expected to land soon, the scenes were unbelievably wild as many fans turned up as they had done the previous day, anticipating his arrival, this time with utmost certainty that he was going to be there. By 2:30 p.m, Messi's former Barcelona teammate Neymar posted on his Instagram a picture of himself and the playmaker with the following caption, "Back together." By 3:00 p.m, Messi appeared from a balcony in Paris, and this caused the crowd to absolutely lose it. As Messi was undergoing his medicals, the fans began gathering outside of the Parc des Princes, all while the PSG social media team continued to post several teasers pointing to Messi's arrival without actually outright revealing anything yet, with one including a post in which there were 6 Ballon d'Ors with the Eiffel Tower in the background. When everything was all said and done, PSG themselves finally confirmed the news to the whole world. The media quickly jumped on it. There was a huge buzz as what was previously considered impossible finally happened. Messi was pictured in a non-Barcelona club shirt for the first time in his career.
Well, these are the shots that many thought they would never see. Lionel Messi wearing a football club shirt that didn't belong to Barcelona.
He took the number 30, the first shirt number he wore at Barcelona.
Amazing and historic day for the club, for the football world. Everybody knows Leo. He's the only football player who won 6 times Ballon d'Or.
Messi was quite possibly the biggest name they could acquire to help them finally fulfill the dream of conquering Europe. In his first press conference at the club, he spoke about how excited he was that he signed for the club, including his imminent partnership with Neymar and Kylian Mbappe.
He's the best player in the world, that is no doubt.
Messi's time at PSG didn't exactly get off to the start himself and his fans had hoped. He went without scoring a goal in his first 4 matches at the club, a period in which a controversial moment between himself and Mauricio Pochettino occurred when the Argentine, who didn't appreciate being substituted off during the match, was seen refusing a handshake from his manager. He would break this unwanted streak when he finally scored against Pep Guardiola's Manchester City in the Champions League, before eventually scoring his first league goal after 5 attempts, including an assist against Nantes. He later went on to grab a hat-trick of assists against Saint-Etienne. For the first time in Messi's career, he failed to hit double figures in league goals, and his 14 assists didn't really do much to shun the critics, considering he grabbed 34 goals and 11 assists in his previous season at Barca. Now, this massive dip in his numbers can be pinned down to several factors. It's a new country, new league, new teammates, new language, and so on. This was his first time playing outside of Barcelona. While a lot of his fans were quite surprised with the way his first season panned out, there were many, not talking about his haters, who saw it coming from a mile away. We're talking about a player who spent 21 years at a certain club and has now completed his first ever transfer move at the age of 34 to another country. Yes, he is in many people's books the greatest footballer of all time, but before that, he is human. And human beings most of the time always have difficulty adapting to new surroundings, and Messi was no exception. Ligue 1 is a more physical league, where games are hotly contested, where there is a lot of back and forth. The players are strong and fast. Physically, it changes a lot. In Spain, all the teams try to play a lot more, and they keep the ball from you if you don't press well. The biggest difference, though, is physicality. This was Messi speaking about the difficulties of playing in France. It shouldn't be ignored that this sentiment that he automatically had to hit the ground running was mostly intensified due to the flying start his arch-rival Cristiano Ronaldo was briefly enjoying at Manchester United, which is often used as a tool to discredit Messi's performances. However, what many of these fans fail to keep in mind is that despite how well Ronaldo appeared to have settled in at his new club, he also isn't an exception to the rule. Just only 3 years prior, when the Portuguese international signed for Italian club Juventus, he also initially struggled to score in his first few games, and even though he picked himself up better than Messi did at Paris, it was most likely due to the fact that Ronaldo had been through the process of moving clubs twice that time and was much better equipped in navigating through this process than someone who was going through it for the first time.
No había vivido nunca una cosa así, así que es mi primera experiencia después de tantos años en un club, un cambio, y la verdad que fue espectacular.
Although his performances were not entirely bad, but for a player the stature of Messi, it was definitely not good enough. He did show signs of brilliance in certain matches, but in some, he almost seemed non-existent. If he was able to get away with not performing at his usual high standards in the league, he almost certainly would not be able to get away with it in crucial stages of the Champions League, as it could directly lead to them being knocked out of the competition, rendering all of their efforts that season in vain. And when this possibility became a reality, all hell broke loose. In the first leg of the Champions League round of 16 against Real Madrid at home, Messi was given a huge opportunity to put PSG 1-0 up when they were awarded a penalty. Unfortunately, the Argentine stepped up and missed it. The match would later end 1-0 with Mbappe scoring the goal to give PSG an advantage going into the second leg. During the second leg at the Bernabeu, Mbappe again puts PSG in front, making the aggregate score 2-0 at the time. In an absolute late drama madness, Real Madrid's Karim Benzema would score a late hat-trick to knock the Parisians out of the competition. PSG, utterly humiliated, left the Bernabeu and the Champions League with their tails firmly between their legs. Back in Paris, people did not like this at all. The defeat was so painful that the club president even managed to get himself in a massive controversy for his reactions on the night. Naturally, as it's often the case in these types of situations, the biggest name in the team often gets his face plastered in these dramatic headlines, and the fans back in France quickly turned on Messi. The fans became hostile. They began booing both Messi and Neymar during their next match, notably sparing Mbappe from their wrath due to the fact that he was the only one out of the three to score during the tie. But how did this happen exactly? M&M was hailed as the next big trio that would take the world by storm and dominate Europe, but this was very far from reality. It's been talked about many times that PSG has serious issues. They weren't exactly in the best of conditions before they acquired Messi, and his acquisition only made things worse. PSG has long been a club plagued with so many issues: player power, lack of authority of managers over certain players, players not caring about the club, and so on. Messi is hardly the solution to any of these problems. The Argentine signing is just another example of how the club's hierarchy would rather prefer to sign a big player rather than building a good solid team. Because of this, PSG is now a team filled with individuals and not a team. A dressing room filled with big egos where the manager has almost no authority over several players in the team.
Cool. Jake, if you've got the same things happening every year, go and get knocked out in a similar way, and it's a different manager every year. I stood on here a couple of weeks ago and said Paris Saint-Germain will not win the Champions League.
In Messi's early days at the club, it was reported that there were cliques in the dressing room, one comprised of the French-speaking players and the other the South American players. Mauricio Pochettino, PSG's manager at the time, was the wrong kind of manager to bring in to coach this team. Pochettino is a manager who had largely worked at smaller clubs prior to his stint at Paris Saint-Germain, and the biggest one he worked at, the one he led to the Champions League final, consisted of many players he personally developed. His star players were not signed as superstars, and since he helped in developing them, there was a level of respect that the squad had for him.
But I have to admit, Harry and Sonny are world-class players. They have a very good sense of the team. They have a very good sense of the balance that we need. And they also do an incredible tactical work for the team when the team doesn't have the ball. So
Pochettino is much better at planning and starting projects rather than repairing and finishing them. Furthermore, his style of play was a total mismatch for the team, particularly for the big front three. Pochettino was a manager that required his team to press high. His attacking players were often industrious both on and off the ball. At PSG, this front three don't press, and an effective high pressing system requires the team to press from the front. If there is a deficiency from that area, the rest of the team suffers. While many blame this PSG team for cracking under pressure against Real Madrid in the second leg, they weren't necessarily fully equipped to prevent this from happening, as there were only just 7 outfield players defending the ball at all times. One section of football fans placed the blame firmly on the team, as they have a history of doing this.
And we saw today how the team folded, and this isn't just a one season episode. This is something that continually happens every single year.
And the other section placed it on the front three, as their lack of pressing opened the window for something of this nature to happen. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, you have Pochettino, who is right there wondering how he could somehow fit 3 players who don't press into a literal pressing system, because he can't bench any of them or risk backlash from either of the club's fans, or worse, from the club. He couldn't, and so he was sacked at the end of the season. This was Steve McManaman's take on this situation. The players are too powerful. They're too powerful under Tuchel, they're powerful under Unai Emery, too powerful under this man. They can't get told off when the going gets tough. They do not care. They play where they want to play. The top three are amazing footballers, but they don't work hard. They do not work hard when the going gets tough. The manager has no power over this team. He has no power over the front three, over Verratti, Marquinhos, because we've seen managers come and go and they cannot sort this out. Just like Thomas Tuchel's done, we know how good he is as a manager because he's shown us, but no one can do it with this team until they change the personnel. They can have one or two up there, but can't have 4 or 5 who don't fancy it when the going gets tough. No chance. In the summer of 2022, PSG appointed Lille manager Christophe Galtier. Galtier immediately addressed the task at hand, which was the front three, and as well as talking about his plans to sort out this issue. During that same summer, Messi and Mbappe were once again at odds with one another over Neymar's future at the club. Mbappe reportedly wanted Neymar out of the club, but Messi wanted him to stay. This power struggle between the front three is the major factor behind their lack of cooperation on the pitch. The lack of connection between them has understandably raised concerns.
Until they work out that they need to be a team and work as a team and work hard and play together as a team, then they're not going to win the Champions League.
Messi and Neymar were once a part of a very successful trio back at Barcelona, with Uruguayan Luis Suarez as their final member. The trio gained massive success, winning several things together, including the trophy that PSG desperately wants. But things haven't gone well for the two of them in Paris without Suarez, and naturally with Mbappe being the only difference here. Fans pointed to him, claiming he was the problem. The key to understanding why one trio worked and the other didn't came right out of the man himself, Luis Suarez. When discussing the reason why MSN worked, Suarez said, "A guy from Uruguay, another from Argentina, and one from Brazil. They all said it couldn't work, but it did, because we both had respect for Messi, the best player in the world, but also because of Neymar's talents, which already makes him a Ballon d'Or candidate now. And I stuck to my role, looked for space on the pitch, knew I had to make good runs to get chances. It was about building a good relationship without any enviousness. We took penalties in turns. Gerard Piqué said he never saw anything like that at this level. That's why we felt sorry when he left. We were colleagues and friends." Questions were being asked about how Mbappe feels about Messi's presence in Paris, because prior to the Argentine's arrival, he was the main man at PSG. Although he's still the main man at PSG, judging by the content of his current contract and the fact that the team still revolves around him, Messi at the end of the day is Messi. The spotlight will always be on him, whether it's intentional or not. Mbappe and Messi are not mortal enemies, but it also doesn't seem like they're close friends either. Mbappe undoubtedly respects Messi, but it doesn't seem like they have a genuine connection on the pitch. Thierry Henry claims that the reason why Messi was successful with Argentina and not with PSG is the fact that Argentina was built around Messi. Anybody going to Barca always knew that at that time, Messi was the main man, and it was easier for everyone else to suppress their egos because they knew that as far as Barcelona was concerned, Messi was the central figure. But at PSG, the moment Messi came, the club was thrown into disarray because they now had to choose between their new star man Lionel Messi and the existing star man Kylian Mbappe for the team to be built around. You can't fault the club for choosing Mbappe because the Frenchman had age on his side, but the best option to build a team around was undoubtedly Messi.
Mon objectif, c'est de faire en sorte que cette somme de talent devienne une grande équipe avec une grande force.
PSG had a flying start to the Christophe Galtier era, with M&M finally learning to cooperate with one another.
Il n'y aura aucun joueur au-dessus de l'équipe.
What seemed like an insurmountable task was finally taken care of by Galtier. Well, that was until the 2022 FIFA World Cup. The first ever edition to be hosted in the winter, the World Cup could not have come at a more inconvenient time. By late November, several top players in world football touched down in Qatar, wearing their country's colors in order to battle it out for the right to be called world champions. The top 3 favorites entering this tournament were Argentina, Brazil and France, 3 teams all spearheaded by PSG's biggest players. After a blissful tournament, the final showdown was between Kylian Mbappe's France and Lionel Messi's Argentina. And after a thrilling 120 minutes of non-stop action which saw Messi score a brace and Mbappe a hat-trick, the world stood still as the game had to be decided by penalties. Messi's Argentina came out on top, therefore ending his long wait for the World Cup trophy. Shortly after the tournament, with the celebrations all done and the focus now turned to club football, there was this fear that the result of this match would fracture the relationship, therefore affecting the team. PSG's post-World Cup form was absolutely terrible. The team began to lose a lot of matches. PSG in general was just an absolute mess both on and off the pitch. Mbappe was made to replace Kimpembe as the club's vice-captain without Kimpembe's knowledge, and the manager Christophe Galtier has been subject to very strong allegations.
The PSG manager was accused of making racist and Islamophobic comments when he was in charge at Nice.
On the pitch, PSG were losing several of their key players through injuries. They lost 3 league matches after the World Cup before their Champions League round of 16 first leg against Bayern Munich, even losing to Monaco days before the match. All these struggles culminated in PSG getting knocked out of the Champions League round of 16, yet again suffering defeats at the hands of Bayern Munich. While the scenes were not as chaotic as the last season, fans back in Paris were far from impressed. But this time, the whole team got an equal share of the blame for the most part, with the general sentiment being that they produced spineless displays across both legs. That, however, didn't stop some fans from pointing the finger solely at Messi for once again disappearing when the team needed it most. Immediately after the Champions League elimination, morale was low. PSG went on to lose 3 straight matches, during one of which the fans booed the whole team, particularly Messi. The fans felt that Messi didn't care about the club, and now that he's won the World Cup, it's only gotten worse. PSG's disappointment in Messi's first season was down to poor planning and system organization. His second season, however, after it all seemed like everything was under control, was just down to circumstances, injuries, post-World Cup fatigue, and so on. He never had a well-structured team built around him. Expectations were always high, and he was often scapegoated for poor performances. Messi has recently come under fire after embarking on a trip to Saudi Arabia without the knowledge of the club. He was sanctioned with a 2-week suspension, and with this came the backlash. A backlash so intense that he had to apologize to the club's fans.
Quería hacer este video después de todo lo que está pasando. Antes que nada pedir perdón obviamente a mis compañeros, al club.
PSG fans have long voiced their displeasure over their hierarchy's market-first strategy and have long been protesting. They know that the people running the club are not attracting players with the right strategy, or rather, the strategy they're using is not attracting the right players. You can buy all of the best players in the world, but you can't buy their hearts and you can't buy their passions, which is coincidentally the major driving force behind Champions League dominance. The issue with their protest is that they take it too far. They created a toxic culture of scapegoating players whenever anything went wrong. It's impossible to make any player want to put in extra to help the team succeed under these conditions. They usually boo the entire team, but the star players are often the ones who get targeted the most. The fans are very much aware that players are only coming to their club because of money. So, the fact that reports were coming out that Messi didn't want to sign a new contract, and then his trip to Saudi Arabia, a place that had been long reported as a viable option for Messi to call his new home ever since Cristiano Ronaldo's transfer there, was the evidence needed for them to confirm that he truly didn't want to be there. In their minds, he fulfilled his commitment to his nation. What about his club? Of course, Messi went there for a completely different reason.
Sinceramente pensé que iba a mantener libre después del partido, como venía pasando durante las semanas anteriores. Tenía organizado este viaje a Arabia, el cual había cancelado anteriormente y este no pude. Y nada, vuelvo a repetir y pedir perdón por lo que hice, y acá estoy a espera de lo que el club decida. Nada más.
But the PSG supporters were having none of it. Their minds were already made up. Messi had to leave, and unfortunately, due to this misunderstanding, he will have to leave in the summer.